Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Talking Point here on Hilaal TV channel 347. My name is Faraz Patel. It's another week, and yes, we still are having load shedding in this country. We even have, earlier I had ESCOM CEO Andre de Ruyter saying we may even go into stage 15 if renewables are not done. Well, we don't know whether we're going to reach that stage or not. We hope that doesn't happen. But today, my guest is going to be someone who's going to shed light on what is currently happening in South Africa with regards to the energy crisis. He headed up the power utility during his time, and the facts are there was no real load shedding that happened. Even if there was, it was at very little stages. But where we are at the country right now, we are easily at one of the worst load shedding eras that has ever happened to this country. Does the past produce the present? What happens now with the present, and how will it affect the future? So joining me to discuss the current energy crisis that we have in South Africa, I'd like to welcome the former CEO of ESCOM, Mr. Matshela Koko. Mr. Koko, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here on Talking Point on Hilaal TV.
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Mr. Koko, I don't want to talk about stage 15 because I think both you and I, we said, listen, that there may be a little bit of unrealism to it, but we are where we are right now. The load shedding situation is at its worst as we speak, and we are going to delve into it later on. I must, though, to get this out of the way, to have your side of the story, talk about the State Capture Commission report, because it does, of course, speak of ESCOM. And it speaks of you being in this report saying that there's a recommendation that you should face criminal charges for paving the way for the Gupta family to purchase Optimum coal mine using ESCOM money. Just your side of the story with regards to that.
There is no recommendation in the Chief Justice Zondo's report that I must face criminal charges. It's not there. There is a recommendation in the Chief Justice's report that the law enforcement agencies, NPA in particular, must investigate. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. The Cape High Court has since made a ruling in relation to that. The Cape High Court says the recommendation by Justice Zondo at the Zondo Commission is just that. It's a recommendation. It may be acted upon, it may not be acted upon. And even if it gets acted upon, it may not be prejudicial. Now, let me put it to you that I have made submissions at the Zondo Commission. And the Zondo Commission was, for me, the best intervention that this country ever experienced, in my view, second to the Reconciliation Commission. The Judge Zondo, the most senior judge in the land, has come to the conclusion, after listening to all the evidence before him, that there was state capture. I do not think we must quibble with that, irrespective of the fact that I disagree with him. But the most senior judge has come to that conclusion. What we must do as South Africans and fellow South Africans is that those that are responsible for state capture must be held accountable. There is no other way. And the law enforcement agencies must do what he says, what he recommends, that those that are implicated must be investigated further. And if at the end of the investigation, there's reason to believe that they've committed crime, the law must take its course, and the NPA must act without fear, favor, or prejudice. That's the country we are in. But what I can tell you, as a matter of course, is that I will not end up in the dock because I've committed misconduct. What is most important about Chief Justice Zondo is that he does not say in his report that Mr. Koko acted unconstitutionally. He does not say Mr. Koko acted unlawfully. He does not say Mr. Koko acted irregularly. Now, if I have not acted unconstitutionally, and I have not acted unlawfully, and I have not acted irregularly, as per the most senior judge in the land, why would I be worried?
You sleep with a clear
I
conscience, I'm
sleep
assuming.
with a clear conscience. So the law enforcement agencies must do their work. State capture, there is no crime called state capture in our statute. The crime is corruption, the crime is fraud, the crime is corruption. And anybody who commits fraud, anybody who commits corruption, anybody who commits money laundering, we should not have sympathy for. The law must take its course, and the law must bite.
Mr. Koko, then why is there a narrative? I mean, obviously there's something you can't control, I can't control. Do you feel that you've been unfairly treated, not just by certain politicians, but also the media?
Most certainly. The allegations against me dates back to 5 years ago. I have not had any law enforcement agent or the police coming to me and say, we have this evidence against you, we believe you've committed crime. We've had investigations by the Reserve Bank, we've had investigations by Parliament, now we had investigations by Chief Justice Zondo, and the three of them, none of them come and say, here is a prima facie case that you've broken the law. Here's a prima facie case that you've acted unconstitutionally or irregular. All the institutions that have the standing to investigate, Parliament, Reserve Bank, Chief Justice Zondo, have not said, here is a prima facie, because there is nothing, because we're dealing with a political problem here. And that is why I am happier that the matter is now with the National Prosecuting Authority, because the National Prosecuting Authority cannot afford to be driven by politics. The National Prosecuting Authority must follow the evidence wherever the evidence leads them, and they must bite. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Koko, during your time, and it's a well-known fact, some would say that we are where we are because of the past, your chance to correct it. You did it, whatever you did, you kept the lights on from an engineering perspective. What was it that you did in order to make sure that there was still energy within South Africa? Yes, there was load shedding, but not quite a lot as we're seeing right now. Because what we're seeing now is, of course, unprecedented with stage 6 and talks of stage 8.
There was no load shedding in my time. I was at the top at ESCOM for 3 years. I've never subjected South Africans to a single hour of load shedding. How you frame the problem today tells you your mindset. Now let's deal with these things slowly and critically. Between 1996 and 2003, ESCOM told government that we are going to run out of baseload capacity in 2007, peaking capacity in 2007. Government did not listen. And at the end of 2004, just after Minister Alec Owen came in, he supported us, and government corrected its policy misstep in 2004 and allowed us to build more generation capacity. But it was too late to deal with the peaking requirements of 2007 and 2008. And because of that, we ran out of the reserve margin. When we told government to build additional capacity, the reserve margin was 35%. In 2007 and 2008, the reserve margin was 5%. So we did not have the reserve margin to withstand any major disturbances in the system. And like Murphy's Law, in 2007, we had a major disturbance driven by two things.
Yes.
Rain, abnormally higher rain, and the lack of coal at Kendal Power Station. Because we did not have sufficient reserves, rain and lack of coal forced us into the load shedding incident, national blackouts of 2007 and 2008. That was resolved. Between 2009 and 2014, there was no load shedding.
Yes.
And that is why it is irrational to blame government on the load shedding, because between 2009 and 2014, there was no load shedding. It's a fact. In technical terms, we say the unserved energy was zero. All the energy that the economy required was served. In 2015, in 2014, in November, we had a 1 in 90-year incident in Eskom. We had the collapse of the coal silo at the Majuba power station, and we lost 3,600 megawatt. Now, in a power system like South Africa, when you look, the reserve margin then was 2,000 megawatts. And the incident at Majuba power station made us lose more than the reserve margin. And because of that, the system operator had no option but to force us into blackouts. It took us 8 months to rebuild the coal silo at Majuba. From November to 8th August 2015, we then had a new silo completed. And because of that, load shedding stopped from 2015, 8 August to when I was fired by the then Deputy President. Zondo says I was fired by Cabinet when I was unlawfully, the court says I was fired unlawfully on 2nd of February 2018. And Cabinet says we're dismissing Mr. Koko to avoid a crisis. But the tenure of Mr. Koko, we spent 3 years, was no load shedding. The crisis that has happened is after I was unlawfully dismissed. And we can go into that. But it's a political issue within the ANC. Between 2018 and today, the load shedding has cost the economy over 700 billion rands. That is a crisis that we find ourselves in. So for the record, in my time, there was no load shedding. The only load shedding that happened before my time was 2014, which was caused by a 1 in 100-year event by the collapse of Majuba silo. What we do, the problem we have today is not the problem we had in 2007 and 2008. In 2007 and 2008, we had a reserve margin problem. We did not have enough capacity to meet the demand. Today, we have installed dispatchable capacity of 52,000 megawatts. The peak demand,
you can continue,
the demand is 30,000 megawatts. We end up into load shedding like we have sufficient capacity, but we can't meet the demand. So the two are different. But we have to deal with it.
Exactly. Well, we're talking about load shedding. We just got load shedding while the conversation was happening. But Mr. Koko, we will be continuing this conversation after the break. We will be discussing what had happened with the infamous war room, which had politicians and, of course, officials of Eskom. To stay tuned to Talking Point. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with Mr. Matshela Koko, former Eskom CEO. Mr. Koko, let's go to the war room, the infamous war room. It was established to go ahead and find a way to make sure that we are not in the situation where we are right now. It was headed by then Deputy President, current sitting President Cyril Ramaphosa. What happened there? Because one of the assumptions is that you have representatives of Eskom, you've got government, which you can't ignore or you can't take away, coming together to find the best interest for South Africans.
The war room was set up in November 2014.
Yes.
Pursuant to the Majuba incident I've described.
Yes.
There was no need for government to interfere. There was no need for government to intervene. We had a 90-year, 1 in a 90-year event that was within the management control. The politicians should have just left the executives to deal with that incident. And if they do not believe that the executives are dealing with it in the manner that is befitting, they should instruct the board to deal with the executives. When we went through a history, and I've been long in Eskom, the white Afrikaners used to say to us, keep the politicians out of the kitchen. And I never used to understand it until the war room came. Because government got involved in a space where they're incompetent in. government was incompetent to execute the mandate that they've written into the War Room terms of reference. It was an extremely frustrating event for me at a senior level at ESCOM, to an extent that I told the CEO of ESCOM then and the minister that I'd rather be fired than go back to the war room again. Because there you had a bunch of politicians that wanted to discuss detailed operational ESCOM problems, but they never had the IQ and the aptitude to understand you.
So they were out of their depth.
They're out of their depth. And because they were out of their depth, they would then accuse you of hiding this and that. The war room died a slow death. And the evidence of President Ramaphosa at the Zondo Commission says so. He says the war room was not helpful. There were many entry points at ESCOM, and we had to close it. If there is one low light and an example of why government should not get involved in operational issues at a state-owned company, is the war room. It was a complete failure, and it was a failure of government. Fortunately, we had the leadership of Dr. Ngubane,
Yes.
who was senior enough politically. When we told him this does not work for us, he stood for us. In fact, Dr. Ngubane said to us, we must stop going there. He will deal with it with the politicians. And we stopped going there. And that's how the war room died.
Because I'm assuming, Mr. Koko, that if the war room succeeds, the politicians take the glory. If it fails, the executives of ESCOM and the engineers of ESCOM and those who are there on the ground take the blame.
You know, I remember vividly the war room meetings. Some ministers are still in office right now. Extremely embarrassing, extremely shocking, extremely embarrassing, extremely shocking. It served no purpose. You know, I remember Minister Pandor in one of those meetings. I remember Minister Patel. I remember Minister Nkwinte. It was a shame. It was a shame. They were in our kitchen and they were out of their depth. And it must never happen again. Government must stay out of the kitchen of the state-owned companies.
But it's not happening at this moment. I mean, we see Minister of Mineral Resource Energy, Minister Gwede Mantashe, there. Of course, last week we saw him signing the IPP deals.
Yes, so the IPP deals are not ESCOM deals. They are DOE deals, so he belongs there.
Yes.
But he must stay out of the ESCOM kitchen. Minister Pravin Gordhan must stay out of the ESCOM kitchen. He must appoint the board, a competent board, not a board that runs an engineering business, that does not have an engineer, that does not have an accountant, that does not have an industrialist. The current board of ESCOM is incompetent. Government must appoint a competent board. A competent board must appoint competent executives that must run ESCOM. And the board is the accounting authority, and it must be held to account when there's no results, and it must be commended when there's results.
After the break, we are going to still continue the discussion of two departments that, of course, have a vested interest in ESCOM, even though you, Mr. Koko, say that government needs to stay out of it. There is, of course, public enterprises and mineral resources and energy and their role. I'm not going to talk about all the SOEs, but specifically in this SOE, right, ESCOM, because ESCOM is under the spotlight with regards to the current energy crisis that we're having in the country. So after the break, we will be continuing the conversation with Mr. Matshela Koko. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. My name is Faraz Patel. I'm in conversation with Mr. Matshela Koko. He's the former CEO of ESCOM. Mr. Koko, before the break, you obviously said government needs to stay away from ESCOM. I put it that maybe government needs to stay away from all SOEs and let SOEs run independently. But there are two departments that have a vested interest in ESCOM from a governmental point of view. That is, of course, public enterprises and mineral resources and energy. What is their role in ESCOM?
Constitutionally, and in terms of the Electricity Act, Department of Energy is a supplier of the last resort. So the buck ends with the Minister of Energy. You will remember that the Department of Public Enterprises, very early on during President Mandela's time, we used to call it Department of Privatization.
Yes.
Because they've put anything and everything in there with the intention to privatize it. And the only reason that the businesses in there were not privatized is because of the pushback from stakeholders such as COSATU, SACP. So you have a legacy issue, but there's no policy coherence. And it creates sticky points between these departments. And it's not uncommon that you find Minister of Energy blaming Minister of Public Enterprises, Minister of Public Enterprises blaming Minister of Energy. Frankly, Department of Public Enterprises must close shop.
Because there is a blame game happening.
Yes, it must close shop, and we align with the Electricity Act of 2006, which says Minister Mantashe or Minister of Energy is a supplier in the last resort, and the buck ends with him. Then we can hold him accountable. Right now, if you hold Minister Mantashe accountable, he says, but the problem is energy availability factor. I have no direct line of sight to it. When you go to Minister Kodan, Minister Kodani says, actually, the problem is not ESCOM. Minister Mantashe is not building more capacity. The center is not. And there is somebody called the Deputy President, Mabuza, who's supposed to bring all these departments together, but the center is not holding. So you have an amorphous mess.
Because as we stand right now, the blame game is there. There is no solution. We have potentially a board that could be changed or added, depending on the constitution of ESCOM. Is that going to help? Because the citizen wants to see energy. They don't want to see a replacement of the ESCOM board or changes to the ESCOM board.
So just to conclude this, the Department of Energy is the supplier of the last resort. Minister of Public Enterprises is irrelevant. The act.
But he's making himself relevant.
He's making himself relevant and causing problems. That position is personal to holder. You'll find somebody who goes in there, like Minister Alec Ewen, who understands how things should be and will work seamlessly with the Minister of Energy to make ESCOM work. But you have the minister here who is extremely dysfunctional in anything you can find, you can think of, who is just dysfunctional. He's announced that we'll have a new board, but today the CEO of ESCOM says we may get to stage 5, to stage 15, if we don't build renewables. Now the CEO of ESCOM should not create panic. Once you say we may get to stage 15, it's a signaling measure. You are signaling crisis. You are simply saying there is no solution. Renewables is not going to stop load shedding, even if you build 100,000 of them. So you're effectively saying, I have no control, I have no confidence in the future, and because of that, we may get to stage 15. I suspect I know why he's mentioning stage 15, because he's blackmailing Minister Mantashe. He's simply saying to Minister Mantashe, I am doing the bidding for renewables. I think you're too slow on the renewables. And if you carry on like this, we'll get to stage 15. That's blackmailing. It's not good for the country. It's not good for South Africa. It tells you that the center is not holding. It's a mess. I can tell you now, that the CEO of ESCOM, under the directors, has caused a lot of damage today by making a reflection to stage 15. Imagine an investor sitting in Europe hearing the CEO of ESCOM says we may get to stage 15. Imagine.
Why would you want to put your money into a country?
Why would you want to go there?
Exactly. Or why would you want to put your money into a country where you may have total
because,
blackout?
Because the CEO of ESCOM is not giving you confidence. Instead, he's simply saying to you, hey, there's a possibility that we'll get to stage 15. It's a crisis.
Before we go to the break, I want to talk of Andre de Ruyter.
Yes.
I don't know your relationship with him, whether you have met, whether you've interacted with him. There's a lot of pressure on him for him to step down. I read comments. I read what other political parties are saying. Put yourself in his shoes when you have the political sort of, I don't know what to call it, interference or the political involvement, especially now. Is he close to, is there a moment where he may just say, enough is enough and I'm gone? Do you feel a bit of remorse for him?
So,
from one former CEO to a current one?
So, in 2017, I received a letter from Minister of Energy. And the letter was saying to me, Mr. Koko, you must sign the agreements for the independent power producers on the 11th of April 2017. And the president went to the State of the Nation address and says, ESCOM, and I was the CEO then, will sign the IPPs on the 11th of April 2017. I refused to sign them because my fiduciary duty was with ESCOM. And we flew to Cape Town to meet the president. And I said to the president with a couple of ministers, I said, I will only sign the IPPs if you give me in writing how I'm going to fund them. Because I can't spend money I don't have. And I can't budget for a loss.
Disrupting the fiscus.
Yes, I cannot do that. So I cannot sign the IPPs because you say I must sign them because you set policy. But you're not telling me how I'm going to fund them. And that is the reason, amongst others, why in my time, ESCOM never reported a loss. Because as a CEO, you can't budget for a loss. As a CEO, you can't commit to an expenditure that you don't know how it's going to be funded. I mention this because without fail, when Andre de Ruyter is asked, we have load shedding, and in his words, we might get to stage 15, what is the solution? His solution is this. And he says this without fail. The private sector must build more renewable energy projects. Today, he said it again, he says, we will get to stage 15 unless we build renewables. No way does he say, I am the CEO of ESCOM, and my duty is to fix ESCOM maintenance problem to keep the lights on. That's what you should be expecting from the CEO of ESCOM. You employ him to look after the assets that are already built. You employ him to make sure that those assets are looked after, are properly maintained, and they are performing within the targets that the Ministry of Energy gives them. But at no stage does he say, I will fix ESCOM. Every time he's asked how you solve the problem of load shedding, he says, other people must build renewables. Why would you keep such a person?
Because the energy supplier is ESCOM.
Yes.
It's written in the Constitution.
Yes. At no stage does he say, we have problem of load shedding. His COO says, the problem of load shedding is caused by maintenance problem. Our maintenance program is not yielding the results. So you will then expect the CEO of ESCOM, when he's asked what is he going to do to solve the ESCOM, the load shedding, you'd expect him to say, I am accountable for these assets. I will make them perform. Another person out there that is not ESCOM, it must be Independent Power Producers Office in the Department of Energy, must deal with new capacity. Your job as a CEO of ESCOM is not to deal with new capacity. That's Minister Mantashe's problem. Your job as a CEO of ESCOM is to make your power plants to perform. But under the raters does not say that. Instead, he's fiddling in the space of the IPP office that is in the Department of Minerals of Energy. He must only stay at ESCOM if and when he forgets about the IPPs, because that's somebody else's problem. That's Mr. Mantashe's problem. His problem is 42,000 megawatts of installed capacity that is not performing. That's what he must focus on. For as long as he does not focus and speak in the, they say, as you speak, so you become.
Yes.
What comes out of the rater's mouth is not, I will fix.
Yeah.
Is somebody else must do this. You need to follow what he says. At all material times, it's them, not him. I've never seen a CEO of ESCOM in my 30 years of association of ESCOM that does not say, I am responsible. It's me. It's always them. It's always the past executives.
Yeah.
It's always Minister Mantashe. It's always somebody. It's never him. It's never him saying, you know what, guys?
Yeah.
As imperfect as it is,
Mr.
it's my
Koko,
job.
we need to go to a break, because after the break, solutions from an engineering point of view, and how concerned should the country be, or is there a slight light of hope? After the break, do stay tuned. We'll be wrapping up the conversation with Mr. Matshela Koko. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. My name is Faraz Patel. This is the final segment of this discussion I'm having with former ESCOM CEO, Mr. Matshela Koko. Mr. Koko, the nation currently, the mood is low, given the energy crisis. I think we're now in our fourth week of the current energy crisis, the current era, as I'd like to call it, of the energy crisis. Your engineering shoes, what needs to be done to solve the issue? Because you and I can sit here, we can go into our homes, and we may still have the luxury of having some sort of power or gas stoves or whatever the case may be. But we talk about those who are in poverty, who rely on energy to put food on the table, who rely on energy to make sure that they can have money to cover the costs. A cost right now, with the increase in goods, the high cost of living, some people can't meet it. What can be done to make sure that we are not where we are right now?
You see, take a football coach. I'm yet to see a football coach who, when things are not working, he does not put the blame on the predecessors. But he can only do that for a certain period. He has to start winning games. And if he fails to win games, blaming previous coaches will not help him anymore. He will be fired, and the new coach will blame him. I think we are at the stage now where the CEO of ESCOM and the board of ESCOM can no longer blame previous coaches. They have to start winning games. What does it mean for them to win games? Now, in their own words, they are saying this. They are saying we are load shedding because we've got too many trips, unit trips, in other words, automatic separation from the grid. They are saying we don't have control of these units. They are separating from the grid. We don't have control of them. That's what they're saying. It's their words. They are also saying we have too many boiler tube leak failures. And they'll give you a story about boiler tube leak failures. The COO of ESCOM will say, we've got 600 kilometers of boiler tubes. We can't prevent them from failing. They're also saying we are load shedding because our maintenance program does not work. This is them saying so. Now they have to start winning games. They have to start sorting out the command and control. When you say you've lost control and you've got too many unit trips, it's a reflection that the command and control structures in the businesses has collapsed. So you need to either you don't have the right commanders or you don't have the right paratroopers, but you need to sort out the command and control structures. In other words, the organizational discipline in the system is collapsed. You need to sort that one out. You cannot afford to proceed without control. 2, boiler tube leak failures. My claim to fame in ESCOM, I was a boiler tube leak specialist.
Yes, I've heard that, yeah.
That's my claim to fame. And engineers will tell you boiler tube failures are preventable and they are not technical problems, it's management problems. So when a utility says we've got a boiler tube leak problems, they're effectively telling you that we've got a management problem. When they say to you, our maintenance program is not working, the maintenance program, reliability engineers will tell you 2 things. If your maintenance program is not yielding the desired performance, it's either you've got a problem with the identification of the maintenance works, or if your the identification of the maintenance works is correct, then you've got a problem with works management. I don't know what is the real problem. I don't think anybody knows. I don't think ESCOM communicates the problem properly. And the reason they don't is because they don't know. You know, you can hear a person with the way he frames the question, but let's assume that the problem is both. So the identification of the maintenance problem requires that critical equipments that are failing, you need to understand their condition, which means you need to have proper condition monitoring equipments, monitoring your critical components, just like your telemetric data, the telemetric equipment on the Formula One machine that tells you the condition of the car. Once you've got condition monitoring stroke telemetric data on the Formula One, then you can know the condition of the racing car. Then the racing car will tell Hamilton when to pit and when not to pit. And when the racetrack engineer with the driver decides, based on the telemetric data, that it is time to go to pit, before he pits, the pit crew, 34 of them, already know what they're going to do on the car when it gets into the pit. When it gets into the pit, the 34 pit crew members, each and every one of them has got a specific task, and he must execute that task within a minute so that Hamilton can get out
and back on the track.
And back on the track and deal with Verstappen.
Yeah.
You know, it's as simple as that. When you've got this car you're driving, take it as a Formula One car. When is it going to pit? How does the driver know I must go and pit based on the condition of the car? Once it's decided that I must pit, I must go into the pit, the maintenance crew must already know what they're going to do on that car so that they can have all the spares on time, so that they can execute the maintenance. And by the way, when this car leaves the pit lane, it must go to the checkered flag. It can't stop halfway. Now, I don't think the management at ESCOM understand this asset management concepts. And that is why they blame the previous coaches. I would like to have a conversation. If I was the chairman of ESCOM, I would say to under the directors, Mr. Directors, forget your previous coach. There is your Formula One car. You need to drive that car to the checkered flag. You are Hamilton. There's your maintenance crew. You need to have the right telemetric data on that car that will tell you when to pit. And when you decide when to pit, whether you're on soft tires or hard tires, you must find the hard tires there. And those hard tires must be fitted in within a minute. If you have to change any other, whether it's a nose on your car, when you pit, The crew must know what you're going to do. It must have bought the spares. It must install the spares. And when you leave there, you must shake Hamilton, Verstappen, and you must beat him and you must get to the checkered flag. And if you don't get to the checkered flag, then either you must go or the maintenance crew must go, but you can't stay.
Okay, we've got a few minutes only, Mr. Koko.
Yes.
Does going to the checkered flag require renewable energies?
Yes. Yes.
So renewable energies can help the situation.
Yes.
You say it won't solve load shedding.
Yes.
Load shedding will be there.
Yes. Yes. Renewables, you see, wind and solar and batteries are not the grid and they will not be the grid. They can only supplement and support the grid. You still need the grid.
Yes.
The grid can only come from coal, nuclear, and hydro.
Nuclear should be an option.
Nuclear should be one. I'm not a big fan of coal.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of coal because I do believe that we've got a climate change problem
Yes.
that cannot be solved by coal.
Yes.
But the future is hydronuclear because the window for gas is out the window.
Out the window. Mr. Koko, one final question in a minute for you to give the answer. Former Statistician General, Dr. Padli Lelohla, has recommended that you return as an engineer at Eskom. Yes or no, would you work under the current Eskom management?
I appreciate the views by Dr. Padli Lelohla, and I'm humbled. The answer to that is that my time with Eskom or any other state-owned company is past. I personally will not work for another state-owned company, not under the sixth administration.
That's it. I think you've given your answer. If you're expecting, I know there's a lot of people that were asking whether Mr. Matshela Koko will return to Eskom. Your answer is right there. He will not under the current administration. Mr. Koko, we'd like to say thank you so much for coming on to the show, for giving us your knowledge and, of course, your time during Eskom. And we hope, as South Africans, that we find a resolution to this problem, because it's not about egos or anything else. It's not about the egos of the politicians or the egos of corporates or anything. It's about South Africans, and our citizens come first. And if they're not getting the energy, then this economy will sink even further than it is right now.
Thank you to your viewers. I respect them, and thanks to you for bringing me in contact with your viewers.
No, it's an absolute
Thank you,
pleasure.
sir.
It's an absolute pleasure. Well, that's all we have for you here. We wish we had more time. There was so much to speak about. We could have taken this for another half an hour to another hour, but unfortunately 1 hour is all we have. That's all we have from you here on Talking Point. From myself, Faraz Patel, the rest of the technical team, we say Jazakallah. We say thank you for joining us, and we will see you again, same time, same place next week. Do stay tuned to Hilaal TV for more content. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.